Hello, this is Erica with Launching Legacies. Welcome to our daily devotional. Today we are continuing a extended devotional about the application of biblical stories, and we're going to look at two spies. And these spies are going to come from the Old Testament, and we're looking at the book of Numbers 13 and 14. So, this is what's happened. Children of Israel were in captivity. The Lord delivered them out of Egypt, and they wandered in the wilderness for about 40 years. Now, it's closing in on the end of their time in the wilderness where they've been wandering and having a bad attitude. And all of a sudden, they get to the border of Canaan, and it is time for them to scout out the land. So, Moses, who's the leader at the time, sends the 12 men from representing the tribes of Israel into the land of Canaan, which is the land that they're supposed to inhabit. He sends the 12 in, and they stay there for 40 days, okay? And now that's Numbers 13, verse 25 says that they were there for 30 days and then they returned, okay? I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, but basically the men come back and they have to give a report. In verse 27 it says, "This was the report to Moses. They said to him about the land, 'We entered the land you sent us to explore it, and it is indeed a bountiful country, a land flowing with milk and honey,'" which is what God said it would be. "Here is the kind of fruit it produces." So they brought these big grapes or fruits to show what they produce. "But the people living there are powerful, and their towns are large and fortified. We even saw giants there, the descendants of Anak." And then they start talking about the different tribes that are there, which I won't burden you with, but you can read it on your own in verse 29. And so then they started to say these things, but they were kind of discouraged. Now Caleb in verse 30 says, he tried to quiet the people down as they stood before Moses, and he says, "Let's go at once and take the land." He's like, let's go do it. He said, "and certainly conquer it." So Caleb believes we can conquer the land, even though it's flowing milk and honey. He's got all these giants and all these people, sure, but it's time for us to go ahead and go in and let's do it. That's Caleb's report. And Joshua's report is similar. But the other men who had explored the land with him disagreed. They said, "We can't go up against them. They are strong. They are stronger than we are. So they'll spread this bad," and they spread this bad report amongst all of the Israelites. So after they spread it amongst all the Israelites, "The land was traveled through and explored that we've traveled through will devour anyone who goes to live there. All the people we saw were huge. We even saw giants, and they're the descendants of Anak. Well, next to them, we felt like grasshoppers," and that's what they thought too. So they're saying, these other men are saying, 10 of the men are saying, "You know what, we'll die if you go there. They're going to eat us up. They're going to destroy us. We're like grasshoppers compared to them." But Caleb and Joshua are giving a different report. They're like, they are giants. You're right. They don't lie or misrepresent what's happening in the land of Canaan. But their response after they say all that they're saying about Canaan is, "Let's go." Right? Let's go. This is true. Now let's go. Let's go conquer the land. The other 10, though, are feeling intimidated by the truths of what's going on in the land. Now, this is the thing. The people believe, of course, the 10 and not the 2, and they start to rebel, and so they start to get angry with Moses. They're like, "You brought us here to die." So this is chapter 14. "You brought us here to die. We're going to die in the land. We need to pick another leader. Why did you bring us out of Egypt so we could die in the desert or die in Canaan, and we can never take this land?" So they're weeping and being very dramatic. I would say probably more melodramatic. You should definitely read the beginning of the 14th chapter, because they're extremely falling apart. It says there was a chorus that rose up in protest against Moses and Aaron. They were serious, okay? And then they asked this question in verse 3. They said, "Why is the Lord taking us to this country only to have us die in battle? Our wives and our little ones will be carried off as plunder. And wouldn't it be better for us to return to Egypt?" So they want to go back to slavery rather than face the difficulties of this new land. And then they plotted against themselves, and let's choose a new leader and go back to Egypt. So they want now somebody to lead them back into captivity where they were slaves, where they had to make bricks and things with no straw and no, it's just a mess. They were living a terrible life, but they'd rather go back to this terrible life than face the giants that are in this land. Now, what's going to happen is Caleb and Joshua are going to try to keep trying to protest, like, please, no, let's do it. Let's just go into the land. We'll be fine. They said it's a wonderful land and we want to go there, and so on and so forth. And then God speaks up, and he's like, you know what? Y'all, you guys have a problem, okay? And because you made me angry. I'm trying to give you something and you don't want to take what I'm giving you, and so I feel a certain way about it. So God's anger is turned against the children of Israel, and Moses has to intercede on their behalf. So Moses intercedes, and he's like, please, God, don't destroy them. Like, don't be angry with them. Don't destroy them. Well, the people will know that the Egyptians will know that you were with them, and then what will it look like if they all just die in the desert because, you know, they've abandoned you, but nobody else will know that. Like, it'll look like a bad testimony for you, Lord. So he says, please, Lord, prove to your power, that your power is as great as you have claimed. For you said that the Lord is slow to anger and filled with unfailing love, forgiving every kind of sin and rebellion. But he does not excuse the guilty. He lays the sins of the parents upon their children, and an entire family is afflicted, even children in the third and fourth generation. So he's reminding God of what God has said about himself. He's like, please, God, don't kill him. And so God decides that he will pardon their request. That's verse 20 of chapter 14. He says, I will pardon them as you have requested, but as surely as I live and as surely as the earth is filled with the Lord's glory, not one of those people will ever enter the land. They have all seen my glorious presence and miraculous signs I have performed both in Egypt and in the wilderness, but again and again they have tested me by refusing to listen to my voice. They will never even see the land I swore to give their ancestors. None of those who have treated me with contempt will ever see it. All right, so here we go. This is where we kind of lay off. And then they don't see it, okay? The ones who have treated them with contempt never see it. They die in the desert, and their descendants, though, enter into the land of Canaan. And so it becomes this really interesting dialogue that's going on with the children of Israel and God. And basically, the application that I want to look at is the 2 against the 12. Right? We have 2 spies that saw the same thing that the other 10 spies saw, but their response was completely different. And in that different response, there was hope. And those 2 spies were the 2 that went into the land. The other 10 had contempt against God, according to this passage, and they were not permitted to go in. Neither were the people who were trying to, turn against Moses and say that God was tricking them and how they should go back into slavery and into bondage. Here goes the application that as we get to the ground level of it. What is it that God has said is good that you are denying? Sometimes we get people who struggle with contentment. They don't know how to be content. They don't know how to accept what God says is good. God says, oh, no, this job, you've been praying for this. You've been waiting for this. This is a good job. Go ahead and do the job and be a good steward. Take care of the your responsibilities and, do what you're supposed to do. And the person is quarreling and contemptuous against what God has done for them, where God has placed them. They're like, no, this job is horrible. I don't know why you gave me this job. I need a better job. I need a better situation. I need a different thing. I can't deal with this. I'd rather go back to my old job than to deal with this. This is a mess. I can't stand it. And so you find people doing this all the time. They're quarreling and being contemptuous against God because wherever they are in life, if they serve God, then we believe that God has put them there. And so why then, when you complain, do you not understand that you're complaining against God? Why did the children of Israel not realize here when they complained against Moses, who God put in control, when they complained against the land that God was placing them in, that they were really indeed complaining against God? Because that's the frustration that God is saying here. These 2 spies refuse to complain against God. They're like, look, the land is everything that he said it is. It's not necessary. It's huge. They've got giants. There's a lot to have to conquer. Let's go ahead and get started because God has promised us this land. That's Joshua and Caleb's position is, yeah, it is. It's going to be some difficulties going in here. Let's get started because we'll need to work hard. But the rest of the people, instead of seeing it as a blessing to go into the thing that God has given them, they see it as a curse, and they begin to indeed curse God because they're not willing to receive the blessing that he says is a blessing. Your children, your husband, your wife, they're blessings because God ordained that you would have them, that he picked them for you. He wanted you to know them. That's part of his design. And so why then do we complain against them? Is your job considered a blessing or a curse? Who gave it to you? Who opened the doors for you? Who gave you favor? It's easy for us to see something with the wrong perspective, but it's important that we have the right perspective, that we see things that God has given us as something that God has given us. And God only gives us good things, good and perfect. Every good and perfect gift comes from the Lord, right? He's not giving us something that he wants us to complain against and quarrel about and be contemptuous. He's giving us things that he wants us to be grateful for. Does it mean that we won't have challenges in those things? I've heard someone say that the other day. Well, if I have challenges in it, then I don't know if it came from God. That's not true. These people are going to have some challenges. They're going to have to fight all the people that they list in this chapter. They're going to have to overcome some difficulties, but it doesn't mean that God didn't have that place for them. It means that they'll have to trust God more in the difficulties to see how he's going to manifest victory where he said there will be victory. You may have to do the same things. You may have to go through some difficult times to overcome the difficulties that are just exist in a situation. It doesn't mean that God hasn't put you there. Continue to trust him. If he opened the door, walk through it. These people stand here at the open door. They refuse to walk. And God says, oh, that's okay. You sit down for a while. You stay right here where you want to stay. And I'll be back. I'll get some other people to come into the land. Your descendants can come into the land. But you, surely, as much as you have been misbehaving, you don't want to get what I have for you. We can't be like the children of Israel. We've got to be victorious in everything God has made us victorious. And for that reason, I'm praying for you. And I hope that you're praying for me. I hope that you're praying for Launching Legacies, because we covet your prayers. And we will see you again tomorrow with another of our devotionals. Don't forget to read Numbers 13 and 14. It's a really interesting application. And think about whose report you will believe. Until tomorrow, have a blessed day.